Do good work is not a label, but a way of living. It is the constant and diligent effort to achieve a new level of excellence in one's own life. It is the hidden inner beauty behind the struggle to achieve excellence. It's not perfect, but imperfect. It is the effort, discipline, and focus that often goes unnoticed. The goal of Do Good Work is to highlight that drive. The guests I have on this show emulate this drive in their own special way. You'll be able to apply new ideas into your own life by learning from them. We will also have one-on-one episodes with me where we'll dive into my own experience with entrepreneurship and leadership. Every episode is designed to provide you with ideas that you can apply and grow in excellence in all areas of your life, business, and career.
Today on the show, we have Greg Grand. Greg is an outsourced VP of Sales who concentrates on helping small and medium-sized companies optimize their sales strategy, process, and execution. He focuses not only on the strategic level, but also the tactical level, which I think is so important, and helps companies achieve record-breaking sales results. He's not a typical consultant, and he works to build alongside of his clients to help them get the results they desire. He's on the mission to serve the business owner in a small or medium-sized market who is struggling with their sales efforts. Greg, thanks so much for being on, man.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Raul.
Greg, so help me solve this puzzle. How does an electrical engineer go into sales? I'd love to learn and share your story with our audience today.
Yeah, it's been an interesting road, and thanks for that question. So I grew up on the East Coast in New York, and as a kid, I'd always like to kind of fix things, or at least try and fix them in Dad's basement, right? The clock broke, or whatever it was, right? I could never put anything back together again, but I was really good at taking things apart. So I had this interest in technology at a pretty young age. Mm-hmm. So I decided to pursue a degree in electrical engineering, which I did, and got my degree in Buffalo, New York. So after being in Buffalo for a few years, I decided it was time to go to warmer weather. So moved out to California, fresh out of college with my BSEE, and I'm going to conquer the world. What happened, though, is when I came out here, it was at a time when the military business was drying up in San Diego, which was the big market when I moved out here. So there were layoffs going on. It was bad. So I started getting interviews here and there. However, every time I went on a job interview for an engineering position, they wanted me to talk to their sales manager. And I would, pound the table. No, I'm an engineer. And they said, no, I think you're probably more geared for technical sales. Well, the thing is, in college, as an engineer, they don't teach you any of this stuff. They don't tell you that there are so many options out there for different positions you can have with that engineering degree that you've never thought of. So I'm like, okay, I'll check it out. So I started out as what would be called a field sales or applications engineer for a semiconductor company, and did that for a couple of years. And we're basically going out with the sales team and traveling with them and being the technical resource. I realized pretty quickly they were making a lot more money than I was, but I was doing all the work in the account calls. So I said, okay, this has got to change. So I talked to the manager, and then I moved into my first field sales position. So I did that in semiconductors for a couple of years. Then I worked for a manufacturer's rep firm selling semiconductors. This is when I started doing my little ladder climb, if you will. From then I was recruited into a computer networking company, and that's when I really kind of took off into high-end computer networking.
Nice.
So I was a director there. Then I got recruited into my next position at a very large contract manufacturer called Celestica. They're about $4 billion now. And my first job there was to build and lead a team to develop the design services group here out in California. We were selling, in essence, arms and legs for design services, hardware and software. So we did really well with that. And since I'd done well with that, I got assigned to what was probably the biggest project in my career. Was I was assigned to go conquer and get some business at Google and Apple, where we had zero business at. So I built a team, and we went out and we did it. And within 24 months, we had over $250 million in business.
Wow.
So pinnacle of the career, working with incredibly intelligent people, traveling the world, it was really cool. A lot of those people are still good friends to this day. However, it came at a big price. And that price was, I was flying 300,000 miles a year. I was home a week out of the month. I think my daughter was about 6 or 7 at the time, and she was having some problems in middle school, transparency, there was some bullying going on. And I was trying to be with her as much as I could, but I was being pulled away from that. So I had to do a lot of business in Thailand. That's where we did the manufacturing for those companies. And I was over there for 3 weeks and got a call from my daughter, and she tells me, Dad, can you come home? I'm having some stuff going on at school. I said, well, honey, I'm at work and I'm going to be here for a couple more weeks. Maybe we can do FaceTime before Zoom took off, right? And she said, no, I really need to see you. Well, that tears my heart out. I still have 2 weeks left in Thailand. So I made a decision that I was going to fly home for the weekend from Thailand to spend a day with my daughter. So I flew 24 hours back to San Diego on Friday, spent Friday night. You actually get back before you leave, it's kind of strange. Yeah, because the international time change.
Crazy.
Yeah. And then, so I came home, spent that and Saturday with her, and then I flew back to Thailand on Sunday for a Monday morning meeting. So I spent 48 hours in the plane in 72 hours just to spend a day with my daughter. You can imagine what's going in my head on this flight back. Money's good, lifestyle's good, cool, but I'm not getting to spend the time I want with my family. And now it's starting to affect me. And I feel selling technology was very cool for a long time, but it didn't make a difference to me. Maybe the internet went faster, but I wanted to have more of an impact. So that was probably, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. And I started at that time kind of getting this pulling. I needed to give back somehow, but at that time I really didn't know what it was. So I came home and I started researching things, and I said, okay, I'll start working with a dog shelter. I'll foster dogs, right? That could be really cool. And there's all these little, right? No, I did that and it was awesome. I had a really great time with it, but it didn't fill me up with what I was looking for. So I figured, okay, kept looking, found the Big Brother program. I thought that would be really awesome to do. And well, kids need leadership, right? There's no family kind of connection there. So, okay, so I do that, go through their grueling interview process and background checks and meet the family, and we're getting set up with dates. And I come home, and 2 or 3 days later, I get a call from my boss that I now have to go to Shanghai for a month because we're having problems with the design stuff for Google and Apple. So now I had to completely pull out of Big Brother because they said, look, unless you can commit to a weekly kind of thing here at a certain time, this is horrible for the child. I get it. Okay. Now on that flight to China, I'm done. So I know that every November, this company lays a lot of people off, and a lot of people in sales generally, they would do this. They'd say, fire the whole sales team. And 6 months later, they'd realize it was a big mistake and they'd hire them back. This was a constant thing.
Yeah.
So I talked to my boss and said, look, I know what happens in November. I've been here 10 years. I'm not leaving because, there's severance involved, but basically lay me off or it's going to be really hard to work with me kind of thing. And, he took it to heart, and sure enough, things happened in November and I got my severance. So I decided, all right, I'm going to take a little time off now, just a few months, I can't sit around, but just a couple months to figure out what's next. And what happened was I went to a trade show downtown San Diego, and it was a fitness and travel trade show kind of thing. And went down there, taking a walk around. I see this booth with this really nice booth. And there's this, probably 25, 26-year-old kid in there, but he's got the crowd enthralled. He just got off the stage, 20 people follow him over to the booth. And I'm even caught up like, oh, what's going on over here? So I start talking to him, and immediately there's just like a connection there. And I start talking to him about the business. This was in the CBD business, which since then is turned into a multi-billion-dollar industry, I think now. But he was one of the first people in, and he made this cream for his sister that had eczema, and then he had a friend that had cancer, and like really amazing things happened. She had shrinkage of her cancer tumor. She had no nausea when she was getting her chemotherapy. I mean, it was just unbelievable. So I said, oh, wow, this is actually really cool. Like, this is something I could help with, and it helps people at the end of the day. So this makes a difference. So I started talking to him. Where's the business now? It was about 75 grand running it out of his garage, but he wanted to scale it. And I kind of had the discussion about, well, how are you planning on doing that? And he didn't have an answer there. So the light bulb went on. I said, okay, I'm okay financially right now. I could probably spend a couple months helping him out and helping him get to where he needs to be, building him the right processes, infrastructure, accountability, getting the right people in the right seat, all that kind of stuff a typical VP of sales would do in a large corporation. But now I'm thinking I can bring this level of experience down to a small company that's really struggling on figuring out how to get to that next level in sales. So I went in there, wrote the job descriptions, hired a 25-person sales team, weekly accountability meetings, coaching, annual business plans, again, everything a VP of sales would do. And I think it was after about a year or so, we were in almost 50 retail stores. We had 6 nationwide distributors, and things were just off to the right. So it was kind of at that point at the end, after talking to him and seeing all the frustration when I started talking to him about having to deal with finance and operations and all the things he didn't want to do. He just wanted to focus on internet sales and do Instagram. And that was his thing, lifestyle brand. And my thing was, well, if you want to really grow, you need to get into the retailers. So I took that, it was in his head, but he didn't want to do it. So I took that whole weight off of him so he could focus on all the things he wanted to do. And he was kind of, it sounds so cliche, but he was able to start working on the business instead of in it. And the in it was the things he didn't like to do.
Yeah.
So on my kind of dinner meeting I had with him and had this whole discussion, and he was really thankful about this. And I kind of did some reflection on the drive home. And that was when the light went on. Like, this is why I'm here. This is what I need to do. To be able to work with small and medium businesses who generally can't afford a full-time VP of sales, nor do they need it. They don't need it if they have, 2, 3, 4, 5 salespeople. You can use someone like me to come in one day a week and get all of that done for you. So that's kind of the longer version of how I got to where I am today. I'm thrilled. I mean, I get up every day thrilled about what I do. Love working with my clients and my referral partners. It's really a lot of fun.
No, and that's incredible because it's a seeking out of impact. Like I love you being able to transparently share that, and also share a little bit more about your personal, perspective on that. And I love that you've been able to find that outlet and being able to really truly help those small companies that honestly can make a difference, but just don't know, either lack of knowledge or lack of experience, or just like you mentioned, don't want to do the things that they know they should be doing, but also getting the people involved to really make a difference. That's incredible. When it comes to working with small or medium-sized businesses, I'm pretty sure you've observed, as a fixer and an engineer, pretty sure you've seen some observations when it comes to what is being done versus what should be being done. What are some of the gaps that you're seeing that are like the major ones for, on average, the smaller businesses who are turning around, several thousand?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So there are, probably a handful of things that jump out. I think one of the biggest things I hear when I'm talking to potential clients is the lack of accountability for their sales team. A lot of times they just don't know what they're doing out there, right? And I have no idea what they're doing, and the revenue, I'm not sure what's happening, and I don't really know who they're meeting with. And there's a really simple solution to that, right? And so salespeople need direction, right? Let's call them hunter salespeople, right? Those are the people that are going to go find you new business, right? So they like to have goals, right? Tell me, if you're going to a new place that you've never been, you don't go without your GPS, right? It's the same thing for a salesperson. Show me where the finish line is. Tell me how to get there. And on the leadership side with the CEO or the sales leader, you have to keep them accountable. How do you do that? It's real simple. You have a weekly meeting every Monday. It's the same timer every week. It doesn't get canceled unless there's a catastrophic event. And it's a meeting with the executives and the sales team. What are they doing in that meeting? Hopefully, this ties into another issue I see, which is the lack of a CRM or customer relationship management type of system. What that'll do is it'll allow you to manage your sales process. You need to have sales process to figure out how you're moving through the sales stages.
Yeah.
So when you have everybody using the same type of software, which that puts out all kinds of reports that you can review every week, what your salespeople were doing. So you're saying, hey, tell me about the top 3 meetings you had last week. Tell me about the top 3 meetings you have this week. Where do you have challenges? How can we help you close that deal? What can we do for you? So that constant communication. And I also think it's important that there's a corporate meeting, which is all of the C-level leaders. And there should also be one-on-one coaching sessions with my clients. What I'll do is I'll have a meeting with the CEO, then we have our group sales meeting, and then I have one-on-one individual 1-hour coaching sessions with every sales member on the team to find out how I can help them get better. How can I help them succeed and hit their numbers? So that's a big one. The other one I see a lot is a poor compensation plan. I talk to a lot of people that pay their salespeople 100% commit or 100% salary, and they wonder why their salespeople aren't pushing for new business. I think that's somewhat self-explanatory why that's not happening. Right? So you need to set the commission plans up so they're fair for the salesperson and the company. The CEO should actually be okay with the salesperson making more money than them in a given year if they blow out their numbers, right? Which is a hard pill for a lot of CEOs to swallow.
Interesting. Yeah.
But when you're getting good salespeople, if they're good and you're not paying them right, they're going to be poached.
Yeah.
Or they're going to leave for someone that's paying them better. So you have to make it a fair deal. There's no exact way to do it, but just for the listeners, the ideal kind of way that I run with it is a 50-50 split between base salary and variable commission.
Mm-hmm.
That variable commission can either be a flat, you sell this amount or you don't get paid. What I like to do is I mix them in with what are called management-based objectives.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd be, say 50% on your revenue and 50% if you do these tasks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're never going to have a goose egg quarter, right? At least they'll get something. So those are a couple of the things that jump out to me a lot.
That's pretty interesting. So I want to go on being a fractional advisor, and like you're able to work with many departments, different types of industries and companies. You get a unique perspective from that. And I think the biggest thing really is how to develop that sense of culture. Because sometimes I've seen or observed or even feel that the sales team has its own culture, and either the executive team might not know how to manage that or may not know how to really communicate in a way that, or build a culture that is both two-way interactions, like this is the things that we need, but also here is the freedom and the tools, the accessibility for you to go ahead and execute your job if you're a hunter, as well as doing some of the quote unquote admin daily task things. So when it comes to leading sales teams, what are some of it's not a strategy, it's more like what are some of the leadership components or the essentials that are necessary for founders or executives or even department heads to be able to truly nurture that relationship and that culture with a sales department to be effective?
That's a great question. And I think with that, you're talking about C-level vision, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the real life situation. So I have a client, and when I get involved with a new client, I don't just talk with the CEO. Once I'm engaged, I talk with every stakeholder in the company. I'm talking with the CFO, marketing, HR, VP of engineering, project managers. I want to get a pulse on what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I find out through these discussions that they love the company, they like working there, but they have no idea what the vision of the company is. So I talked to the CEO there and I explained to him that, like, look, your team needs to hear from you on a regular basis about where the company's going and all the exciting, cool things that are happening. When's the last time you've done that? And he kind of just shook his head and he said, you figured out my biggest weakness. We don't do that. And I said, why? And he says, well, we get busy. And I said, that's not an acceptable answer. Mm-hmm. You are the leader of your company, right? So I think that's the thing. And that can be accomplished by, monthly meetings, just once a month, having a company-wide meeting. The
Mm-hmm.
teams like to see the CEO and the leader up there talking about the company and the great things that are happening, and maybe challenges as well, too. But I think from a leadership standpoint, that really needs to come from the top. From a sales leadership standpoint, I think, there's two different kinds of management styles. And there's the old school, which still exists pervasively, which is the, do it because I told you to do it mentality, or do it or else mentality. And we know that doesn't work very well, right? So I think the sales leader of today has to have a much more collaborative coaching and really kind of coming at it from a servanthood perspective, really, where I believe my job is not to make my number. I believe my job is to help my sales team succeed and make their numbers and turn them into better salespeople, more consultative salespeople, right? So I think it's a combination of that CEO setting that vision and the sales leader being very involved, probably more than they ever have been, traveling on them with sales calls. I talk to so many sales managers and they haven't been on a sales call with their salespeople, maybe ever, right?
Wow.
Okay, so you could challenge that and say, well, what about Zoom? Well, what about Zoom? You can join a call. This is my VP. He wanted to meet you, right? Cool. No big deal. I don't even have to talk. I'm observing there, right? But if you don't do that, all you're hearing is the salesperson's view. I can't tell you how many sales meetings I've run where they want to tell me about the lunch they had and the cool book they shared and, that they both like to, walk their dogs and play guitars. And that's all great, but you need to get a little bit past there, right?
Mm-hmm.
To kind of get down to the
rapport setting,
yeah, exactly.
No, I love that. So I'm sorry, you were going to say something?
No, I was just still want to see if that answered your question.
No, that does, because it's more of like the cohesiveness of what the leaders are doing, but also the department head or the VP in this case, but also coming it from more of a proactive approach as opposed to just reactive. And I love that you mentioned the servant leadership, because it's how can I empower the team to do better? What are the tools? What are the trainings? What are the things that they're missing? And I guess I'm pretty sure you get this feedback or this pushback a lot, but there's recorded Zoom calls. I can just listen on those in the future, right? And how is that not different from being on the call there? Because there is a difference, and I want to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah. So, the difference is I'm there and it's real time. Listening to something recorded, first of all, it's just, you're reading a recording and you're likely not going to be as focused. The other things is it gives me opportunities to jump in and not save them, but jump in and maybe hit a couple things. So I got done with a call last week, and I'm sure you've heard the old, and it's been around for a while, but it's becoming more prevalent now, which is the BANT type of technique, if you will, which is when you want to find out from your clients their budget, the authority, their needs, and the timing, right? Those 4 things you need to know. If you don't know those things, you don't know how valid the deal is. Yeah. So went through a call with the salesperson and we got to the end of that call and none of those things were asked at all in the call. So they kind of cued it over to me because I think the other thing that to back up, the most important thing, if you're going into a call, you have to set the expectations on both sides internally. Like when tell me about the account, tell me where we are, tell me who we're meeting with, and what's my role today? Am I an observer? Do you want me interactive? Right? What do you want me to do? Because the worst thing, I don't want to step on my salesperson's toes. It's their time in the light, but I want to be there to catch them if there's a slip. So when I took over at the end, I addressed all those things, right? So had I not been on that call, the discussion would have been, why didn't you qualify if they
almost
had a budget?
A waste.
Well, yeah, it was a chatty phone call. And, building a relationship and bonding and rapport.
It's never a waste, but it's also, they could have been effective on both sides, respectful of the time to make sure, can we help this client as well as, is this a good time for my sale? Obviously, training is always going to be good. So it's not a waste in that sense, but, kind of like objectively.
Well, I think that's a good point too, though, because sales training is another big one. So sales, 2 things in sales training. One is it's not one size fits all. And the second thing is it has to be reinforced consistently. You've been around a while. So have you ever been to a really cool seminar and you spent 2 days and everybody was doing backflips and you came home and 2 weeks later you see those books in the corner collecting dust?
Oh, yeah.
Right? We've all been there. So when I have my sales team go through sales training, the sales training that I use is integrated into my sales process. So they're getting trained on the process. Every Monday morning, they're talking about the process. And then I have them go into, what we call the sales gym, where they get together with a bunch of other peers and role play and talk about best practices and things like that. So every week we can tailor, okay, this person needs help on qualifying, or this person needs help on rapport building. And you tailor that by those individuals. So you can see how it dovetails. Sales training goes into the company culture, goes into the one-on-one sales meetings, goes further into the one-on-one coaching sessions. So there's that funnel of top to bottom to make sure we're building this person up and helping them improve their skill set so they can perform better over time.
I love that because it's looking at every optimization point within the conversations, like from bridging the gap from rapport building to finding the needs, from finding the needs to like, why is this the right time to budget, like all those different what I call conversion points. If we're looking at a funnel, like what are the optimization points that we can improve on, being able to not only, that's our process, this is how we're going to do things, train the team that this is the process, but also optimize based on where they're finding weakness in it. And I love because it's all supporting the main outcome, building a stronger team, building rapport within the team so they know like, oh, this is the other sales rep and this other department, the other side of the company, or who services this territory. So I love that it's more of a holistic approach as opposed to, like you mentioned earlier, just do these things and then I don't want to talk to you, just go to the field.
Yeah. And you bring up, and it's interesting how when you analyze what I said, it brings up other points. So you were talking about process and funnel, right? When you're working on your funnel and pipeline, right? Let's talk, because if I look at it, funnel is your big, these are suspects, right? Or maybe they're prospects. What I'm more focused on is the pipeline, right? So the funnel flows into the pipeline. Now the pipeline, as you know, is going to have stages, right? It's a suspect, it's a lead, it's a prospect, it's a marketing qualified lead, right? It goes down through this process. The other big issue I see is that people just click through the processes and they say, okay, well, yeah, this is now a suspect and this is now why? What made you decide that? Because you feel that? So a crucial thing is to make sure in between your sales stages in your pipeline, you have checkpoints, things like BANT, right? I don't want anybody moving it from something that's 20% to close to 40% closed unless I know if the budget's there, unless I know if they're going to be buying within the next 6 months, unless I know if the person I talk to is the right person to be talking to. The call I was talking about the other day, through this discovery, I found out that this was an engineer who was doing the research and getting 4 bids who he was going to again give to the CEO who would make the decision. Well, we're working with this person, but we need to be in front of that CEO. So that was a direct request, is like, when we do this proposal, can we sit down with your CEO and run it through and give them a little overview on what we do and who we are? And it was agreed to. About going back to, had I watched that video recorded call, that never would have happened. We would not be bridging to getting in front of the actual decision maker, right? So having those steps is what's going to keep your pipeline clean, which is then going to give you clean vision into your revenue numbers, really.
And almost like the checklist manifesto, right? Do they meet these requirements? Yes. Then you can move them over. Not just because you thought that this conversation felt this way, then you can move them over. It's like they have to meet these requirements. If not, we need to go and clarify before you can move them over to the next pipeline stage.
Yeah, I think that's kind of maybe where my engineering side comes in. I want data, and I want the data to be right. I mean, feel good stuff is great, but there's no place for it when you're talking about, the sales, how the sales is going to move to the next step. It's got to be, let's talk about the real metrics that are going to drive us to bringing this revenue in. And I hope it's going to turn into a lead. We call that hopium, right? So that's, hope shouldn't exist in sales.
You have to do it into action. You have to actualize it, put it into the material. And that's pretty interesting. So Greg, I'd love to kind of like shift the gears a little bit and talking to leaders themselves. Like, what are some of the mindsets that they need to put on or understand more when they're working with sales teams so that they can be not only more effective in their communications, but also be more effective in their entire top down, not just organization, but process?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think for the successful salesperson, there's really, it's a triangle, right? And that triangle would have three corners on it, of course. And one would be behaviors, and the other would be attitudes, and the other would be technique, right? So you need to have all of those things equal, which rarely people do, to succeed and make sure, right? So first thing, behaviors. If you're prospecting, are you doing the right things? You should reverse out and say, okay, for me to have one deal close, I have to make 5 proposals. How many meetings do I have to get to those 5 proposals, right? And then kind of backtrack it. How many calls do I need to get to those meetings? How many emails, right? So the behaviors, what are you doing every day to grow your business, right? Then there's the attitude. And, with a salesperson, you've got to be self-motivated. You've got to get up every day ready to go out and kill it and face massive amounts of rejection, because that's what happens in sales. Whether you're the best or the worst, you're going to get beat up. It's not the easiest career in the world, right? Yeah. So you have to keep your attitude in the right place. And, I believe in staying fit and going to the gym and trying to keep my head clean and doing things to get it out of that, because otherwise, if you get into a dark run, especially if you're prospecting for a while and you go dark and feel like you're making no success, it's going to have a big impact on your calendar, a couple weeks down the line. Anytime I'm slow, I can look back and see a couple weeks ago, I probably wasn't doing the things I should have been doing that, usually keep my calendar full. And then the third thing would be techniques, right? And that goes into the sales training we were talking about. Where are they strong? Where are they weak? And then, the salesperson has to realize that themselves and ask for help. It's really hard for a lot of salespeople to actually go, look, I'm stuck, right? Because there's generally a lot of pride. If you look at things like personality profiling and disc modeling, you're going to have very dominant and influential people there. So, it is what it is. But for me, that's what I look is that triangle to make sure. And if the techniques are weak, great, we put in some sales training. If their attitude's not great, let's have some one-on-one time and figure out what that is and how we can make that better. If it's behaviors, maybe, that's a little bit of on the Monday meetings, on the one-on-one coaching, look, you have to make 100 calls a day. It looks like you're not getting there. What's the challenge, right? What can we do to help you? So I believe in all those things. It sets it up for a coaching discussion. Those are the 3 things that I look at, though, and that I believe breed success.
You're making it simple, and I love the fact that from your engineering analytical mind that you're able to dissect this and make it more approachable and pretty precise. Let's dive in. I want to dive in real quickly into the coaching side, because you mentioned when you're working with salespeople, especially hunters, there's high dominance, high assertion, high go-getter. How do you break that down? How do you make the environment where they can share their weaknesses? How do you approach that? Do you come in strong? Do you come in saying this is a safe spot to share weaknesses? Or how do you actually approach that in your coaching sessions to really pull out the juice and really help them become more empowered?
That's a great question too. So this is where, and I mentioned it at a very high level, this is where I rely heavily on DISC and behavioral testing. Right. So if I go into an organization and there's existing salespeople, or if I'm hiring new team members, which is quite often the case, I work with my recruiter and they go out and they'll bring me my top 3 candidates. I'm going to make every one of those people take a DISC test, which is, for the people that don't know it on the call, it's DISC. It's a well-known kind of personality profiling test. It's similar to Myers-Briggs, that kind of thing, but it's very easy to understand. So I have everybody go through that. And when they go through that, I can get a good assessment as to who they are, both personally and professionally, because it shows their normal style and it shows an adapted style. People generally act differently at work than they are outside with their friends, right? So it's really interesting. When you get a little deeper into that, and there's tons of resources for free on the internet, you can even do free DISC testing at a couple different sites just to play around with it. I recommend everybody does that because it's really neat. And it actually makes you look at yourself, go, wow, is this what people really think of me?
Yeah.
You know, and for salespeople, sometimes it could be like a little punch in the eye with the real dominant people. The flip side of that is knowing that there are charts out there and there are, you know, papers and things that teach you how to work with different DISC personalities. So DISC is a chart, right? There's the D in the top left quadrant. There's the I in the top right quadrant in this circle. Those are going to be your outgoing, you know, salespeople, marketing people. They're friendly. They walk into a room, they take it over. Everybody loves them. That's that. On the bottom side, you're going to have the steady and conscientious people. And those are going to be more the engineers, the finance people, the operations. So if I'm talking with someone, I'm pretty fast-paced type A kind of guy, and I know this. But if I know I'm dealing with someone that's really, you know, like a finance person or an engineer, I pull way back. And I know that if I'm selling to someone that has that dominant or intellectual, I can probably do it. Like, use me as an example. You know, I'm like a get to the point kind of guy, right? Yeah. Like, let's bring that 30-minute conversation into 5 minutes and get to the essence of it, right? But there's other people, and I can make a decision that way. I'm like, just give me the top 3 bullets. I'm going to tell you if I like it or not. If I'm dealing with an engineer, though, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
They need data. They need to see charts. They need to see graphs. They need to see projections, right? So knowing those type of personalities and learning a little bit more about how to interact with them is how I approach it. So I'm looking at the human, not just from a hard skill set, can they sell, but who are they? What drives them? How do they like to learn? What motivates them? Strangely, not all salespeople are motivated just by money. They want to feel like they're part of something bigger. Maybe it's, you know, an altruistic cause, whatever it may be. But when you have interactions like this, unless you understand that DISC modeling or something to that effect, you're just kind of shooting in the dark. And a lot of times you don't think about it. When I'm talking to somebody in my head, I'm trying to profile them and go, okay, what's their DISC personality? You can at least break it down to if they're the outgoing or, you know, extrovert, introvert kind of thing. And from there, then you can adjust your tone there. And it's just slowing down and providing more data. And with the, you know, more active kind of people and more direct people, it's bullet points and let's go. You know, send me a video. It better be under 15 seconds, you know?
No. Hey, how do you know? No. And I love the fact, because this goes back to being the servant leader. And obviously this is more preparation, more figuring out not one size fits all, but making sure that you have the tools or the arsenal to be able to approach, here's the right type of training, here's the right way of presenting, here's the right tonality that need to use. And that's more of an adaptive servant leader, as opposed to like what you mentioned earlier. And I love that you focused on that. And I love how you broke that down. Again, it's not one answer to fit all. It's like, here's a framework that I use in order that, so that you can work with your people, and as well as how you like to work as a leader. So that's critical. Greg, for all of our listeners out there, I'd love to send them your way. What's the best way for people to thank you for this episode, as well as reach out to you and see what you're up to?
Yeah, sure. So best way would be either LinkedIn. You could look me up. My name is Greg Grand, Greg, to spell my name right, Grand. My email is ggrand, Ggrand @salesacceleration.com. So that's sales, XCELERATION.com. And if it's something you want to just call me and give me a chat, you can give me a call on my cell phone, which is 619-417-1100. No spam calls, please.
We'll put the link for LinkedIn on the show notes. But Greg, thank you again for being on, man.
All right. Thanks for having me, Earl. Bye now.